I am not working for any company. I am not representing any company or product. I'm retired, and when you're retired, you can do what you want to. And this is what I want to do, because clay was introduced to our family back in 1975. 8 children came into our home, and clay was there. Blessed our family immensely. It kept us out of the doctor's office multiple times, kept us out of the drugstore many, many times. So I feel sorry for people who don't have clay in their lives or know how to use it. I tell people, don't have kids until you've got clay and you know how to use it. Now, for some of you, that might be too late, but seriously, this is why I do it. I'm not representing a product. I'm not here to sell. I'm here to educate, to show you another tool in the medical toolbox. You're going to hear some things that may make you think I'm anti-doctor. I'm not. I believe in conventional medicine when there's a need for it, but if you've got something that works better than conventional medicine and it's cheaper, why not use it? So with that introduction, we're going to talk about external uses of clay and internal uses of clay. We're going to do external first. The information that I'm going to present, a lot of it came from a book that's called Our Earth, Our Cure by Raymond Dextrate. And Dextrate said to use the clay. Now there's a lot of different kinds of clay. Some clays are good for making pots, some are good for making bricks, some are good for paint, but there's certain kind of clays that have medicinal properties. The clay that we were introduced 40 years ago happens to be one. The clay comes as a fine dry powder, it looks like baby powder, but to use it you need to make it into a gel, about like mustard or mayonnaise. You want a gel that's thick enough to where when you put it on a wound it doesn't drip on the carpet. But you want it to be thin enough to where when you put it on a wound you don't want to have to press it, squeeze it, push it. If a kid's got an owie already, the last thing he wants is somebody shoving on it. So mayonnaise or mustard is the consistency that you want. That's for the women. For you guys, it's sheetrock mud. To make that, the recipe is basically 3 parts water to 1 part clay. And so you want a jar that looks like this. To make a jar that looks like that, 3 parts water to 1 part clay. There's 2 cups of water in that jar right now. And now we're going to add to those 2 cups of water, we're going to add 1 cup of clay. And after the 1 cup of clay, then we're going to add another cup of water. And you'll see that the white clay, dry clay is white, wet clay is gray. And so now, with a sandwich, you want a sandwich. You want water, clay, water. If you put the clay in the jar first, you'll never get water to the bottom. If you put the water in first and the clay at the top, you'll never get clay to the top. So it's got to be water, clay, water. And you can see that that clay that white dry clay is still in there, sandwiched between the water. We could come back here tomorrow and there would still be white clay in the middle of that, because the clay seals the water above and below. That's why you got to have a sandwich. Water, clay, water, 3 parts water, 1 part clay. Once it's there, tight lid, and then you just shake it. And you shake it, and you can hear how runny that is. Now, at the end of this class, we're going to take this lid off, and we're going to hold it upside down over this young lady's lap. Think you'd want that? Can you hear how runny it is? The clay takes a couple of hours to swell, to fully swell. That's why I brought this one that's already done. Now, once you've mixed the clay into the gel, it never goes bad. It never separates. You can keep it. In fact, you should keep it on hand in advance. And I'll tell you why. So once you've mixed it up, then it's very important where you put this jar. It needs to be in the kitchen cupboard next to the salt and pepper shaker. Just kidding. But it's a good idea, because if it's not next to the salt and pepper shaker, you'll forget it's there. And then when there's a crisis and you need clay and it's worked its way to the back of the cupboard, you'll forget that you've got clay. So next to the salt and pepper shaker is a good idea. Now, Dextrate said to use glass. You definitely cannot use clay and metal. He said use glass is preferred. You can use plastic in some situations. So in our kitchen cupboard, we have a glass jar like this that has been in our kitchen cupboard since 1975. And if one of our grandkids takes a nosedive in the driveway, comes up all skinned and bloody, we just run in the house, take off the lid, and we just scoop out clay and put it where it needs to be. When this jar gets less than half full, maybe down to a third full, then I just add more water, add more clay, and shake it back up. So that's in the kitchen cupboard. But I don't want a glass bottle rolling around in the trunk of my car or in my pickup truck. So in the vehicles, we keep a plastic tube, one of these squeezer tubes, and it'll roll around through the heat of summer, through the freezing of winter, 365 days a year. But if we're on vacation, if we're in the mountains, somebody gets scratched, cut, burned, whatever, injured, where's the clay? In the trunk or under the seat. Now, why do you want it mixed up in advance? This story shows that. Our secretary's little 4-year-old daughter one night put her hand on a stove right after it had been turned off. Her mother reached over there and tried to pull her hand back, didn't make it. When she pulled her little girl's hand back, every ring of the hot plate had left a blistered line through the fingers, the palm, but on the heel of the hand where the little girl had put the most weight, pulling herself up into the stool, the flesh came off from the hand and was stuck on her smooth top range. Luckily, she had clay and knew how to use it. So she grabbed her little girl and she held the hand under the faucet for 5 minutes, 6, 8 minutes, whatever, while they got the bottle of clay, and then they just buried her hand in the clay, buried the whole hand in the mud after they had ran it under the tap. And then she sat down in a rocking chair with this little 4-year-old girl who's just screaming bloody murder. Her little girl was asleep in her arms in 15 minutes. Not just had quit crying, was asleep. So she got up and took a bread sack and slipped a bread sack over the hand, up the arm, because on a burn, you do not want it to dry. And if you make any note, just remember this. On a burn, you do not want clay to dry. So a bread sack over the hand and up the arm did this. So she took this little girl, who's now asleep in 15 minutes, went in later in her bed, wondering if they should call the doctor, should they go to the ER. Her husband says, you never wake a sleeping baby. Slept through the night, came to her mother the next morning asking if they can take the bag off the hand. Her mother said, no, you have to leave it on there today. After breakfast, she saw her out on the driveway, riding her little bike with both hands on the handlebars. That night, 24 hours after the accident, the mother couldn't stand it anymore. She said, I had to see that hand. She took her in the bathroom, washed the hand, and never did another thing to it. And she brought her to work 2 days later when her daycare fell through. I'd heard the story. I said, let me see this hand. She stuck her little hand out, no lines across the fingers, across the palm, nothing. No scabs, no scars, nothing except on the heel of the hand where the flesh had come off, there was a line of pink skin. No scab, no scar, just pink skin. Now that's why you want this clay mixed up in advance. Can you imagine trying to mix clay, 3 parts water to 1 part clay, while your little child is pulling on your skirt or your pants, screaming in pain, and you're trying to mix clay? No, that's why you want it in advance. Now the mistake that most people make with the clay is they don't use enough clay on a burn. But I do need a person with bare arms. Would you be my victim? I mean my volunteer. We're going to pretend she's got a burn on her arm. It's not a big burn. It's only the size of that end of that bottle. And it's just here on the arm. Now if it were a real burn, we would run cool water on it to dry it out first, to cool it down, to get the heat out. Once the heat is out, then if that burn, remember the burn is only that big, the end of that bottle, I would use that much clay. The mistake most people make is they don't use enough. So we'll just say the burn's right there, and so we're just going to put the clay on the burn. And again, the clay is thin enough. I'm not having to shove it to smooth it out, but it's thick enough it's not dripping on the floor. Once the clay is on there, and you want the clay to cover the burn plus like an inch on each side. And once it's on there, then we're going to cover it, because on a burn, you do not want clay to dry out. Now, for somebody who cannot stand the feel of plastic on their skin, we could do this with a wet towel, and then by continuing to spray it with water, we could keep it wet. So a wet towel would do the same thing if you keep it wet, but it's easier to use plastic and then not worry about having to re-wet it as often. Now, another reason that you want an extra amount of clay on there is because once you start to cover it with plastic, once you got the clay on there, you really can't see where the burn was. And as you're putting the plastic around, many times the clay gets pulled kind of off to the side. And now, you know, that burn, the clay is mostly here on the top, but the burn, I know it was here, more down here. So if you have enough clay on there, you can work that clay over to where it needs to be, and we're still okay. If we had only started out with a 1/4 inch thick layer, we would not have been able to do that. When you put clay on a wound, including a burn, you can expect the pain level to drop 80% within the first 15 or 20 minutes. Everybody raves about how the pain drops with clay. And especially on a burn, room temperature clay is cool. Now this is cool because it's been out in my car. But even room temperature clay feels cool. And what's better on a burn? Something cool. And so you can expect the pain level to go down 80%, and it'll stay down as long as two conditions are present. One is that the heat is out of the burn. The other is that you've got enough clay on there. So now we've treated the burn, and now we just wait and see. At some point, if that pain starts to come back up, then you ask that question. Do we need more clay? Is there still heat in the burn? Either way, you're going to take that off and either run more water on it and then apply more clay, or just apply more clay and then plastic wrap again. And so you just change it. If the pain comes up, you change it. Now, you want to change it at least twice a day, even if the pain doesn't come back up, because that clay acts as a sponge. And just like a kitchen sponge, just like a kitchen dishcloth gets stinky if it's not changed often enough, the clay, because the clay is absorbing toxins and the byproducts of the healing process, that clay will eventually need to be changed. And when you change that clay, and to change the clay, all you do is take the plastic wrap off, stick it under the faucet of the sink, gently wash it off. You don't scrub it, you don't make it hurt. You just gently remove, let the clay wash off, then put new clay. And then replace the plastic wrap. And you do that if it starts to hurt, but you do it twice a day, even if the pain doesn't come. And when you change it, if there's a smell, a foul smell, that means you didn't change it soon enough. So that's okay, but the next time you change it sooner. Just an hour sooner, or just sooner, because there should be basically no smell when you change that at all. And you'll just change that twice a day, or sooner if the pain comes up. And you do that every day until it's pink skin. Might be one day, it might be 1 week. I could tell you stories till noon tomorrow of what this clay has done for burns that would knock your socks off. But let's go on. You can do that with a curling iron burn. Say you got a curling iron burn. How do you cover that? Well, you just put on the clay, and then you just take a small piece of plastic and stick it right there, and the plastic will stick to the clay, and it'll keep it from drying out until you want to take it off. Again, if it starts to hurt or if it falls off, that's fine. Just put more on, and just a tiny little piece of plastic like that. So that's a burn. What about an infection? I have a friend whose neighbor was bitten by a brown recluse. And this brown recluse spider bite, in 2 weeks, most of the arm looked like third-degree burns, but in the center of the arm, there was a circle of flesh, about 2 or 3 inch circle, that looked like raw hamburger in the meat counter of the grocery store. The guy said it was killing him pain-wise. So my friend packs it in clay, just like we did this, wrapped it with an ace bandage. Because on an infection, you want it to dry some. You want it to dry some because as it dries, it draws, and it sucks out the infection. So his pain level went down 80% within 15 minutes. Twice a day, he would take off the ace bandage, stick his arm under the faucet, wash off the clay. Any clay that stuck down inside that hamburger type tissue in that crater, he just left, put new clay and ace bandage. Changed it every day for a week, and in 1 week, it was 90% healed. He went back to the doctor, showed the doctor, thinking the doctor would be happy and impressed, and the doctor said, well, now we know it wasn't a brown recluse. This guy just about decked him. He said, I wanted to punch his lights out. He said, what do you mean, doc? You've been treating this thing for 2 weeks as a brown recluse spider bite. The doctor said, brown recluse bites can't heal like that. It must not have been one. We've healed dozens of brown recluse spider bites like that, and even better if you don't wait 2 weeks. So on an infection, you want it to dry. Now with clay, you can get really creative. My wife is a seamstress. She stuck her finger under the needle of a sewing machine, and it hit the bone, shattered the needle. She jerked back, ripped her finger open. I heard her yelp. I was in the kitchen. She went in the sewing room. She had her finger in her mouth so she wouldn't bleed on this white fabric. She said, "Get me some clay." She put her finger back in her mouth. I went to the kitchen and I put a big tablespoon of clay in the corner of a Ziploc sandwich bag. We buried her finger in the clay. We put a loose twisty tie above the knuckle. She went back to sewing because these were costumes that had to be ready for the morning dress rehearsal. 20 minutes later, I was in the kitchen making a phone call. She came in to get a drink, and I said, "How's your finger?" She said, "It doesn't hurt." I thought, liar. There's no way that could not hurt. She said, "I feel no sensation of pain coming from that finger." She finished the costumes, went to bed, slept with that bag on her finger, slept through the night, pain-free. One time, I was helping a neighbor with a broken sewer pipe. I learned that night that jagged, broken PVC can be as sharp as a ceramic knife. I learned that as that jagged PVC took a big slab of skin and laid it back. I pushed it back in place. I'm a Boy Scout. I know about direct pressure. In 5 minutes, I had the bleeding stopped. Then I thought of the raw sewage that had come out of that pipe, and I thought maybe I should do more than just stop the bleeding. I went to my house, put my finger in a bag of clay, just like I'd done for my wife. Within 5 minutes, before I'd even crossed the street to help again, there was no pain coming from that finger. I left my finger in clay for 36 hours. I have no clue where that scar should be. If you don't use plastic, if you put the clay on the end of the finger and cover it with a handkerchief, you can suck a sliver out from underneath a fingernail. It's better than a pair of tweezers and a needle. We've seen the clay suck out glass, rocks, plastic tines from forks. It's amazing what the clay can pull out if you put it on, cover it with fabric, let it dry. Now you don't want it to dry totally. You don't want it to get bone dry because then it'll go like cement adhered to the skin. So you want to change it when it's still somewhat moist, maybe like Play-Doh, so it's still somewhat moist before it's totally dry. Now the clay is messy. Can you imagine trying to pack broken or a pulled muscle in your back or cracked ribs, putting it on like that? It's messy, and so we make what we call a burrito, which is just a piece of cheesecloth, and then you put a big gob of the clay mud on the cheesecloth, fold the cheesecloth over, and as you do, you spread it out to where it ends up being about a 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch thick. Now you've got a clay patty, about like a hamburger patty, that you can ace bandage onto cracked ribs, onto a child's earache, onto a black eye, onto swollen glands. You can ace bandage that anywhere on the body that you want it. I know people who have healed hernias with a clay burrito inside their shorts over that hernia area for 6 weeks, wearing a hernia belt during the day and a clay burrito on the hernia every night. Natural clay has a negative electronic charge. Most free radicals, heavy metals, toxins, and poisons have a positive charge. Opposites attract. So the natural clay is able to pull out toxins and poisons, free radicals, heavy metals. It'll pull those out, but it won't pull out the vitamins, minerals, and good nutrients. You can detoxify your body through a full body bath, getting in a tub with 3/4 of a cup of clay, or you can do a foot soak with 2 tablespoons of clay. Either way, you use water as hot as you can stand, and you stay in for about 35 to 45 minutes. If you do the full body clay bath, you can just let that clay go down your drain. We sent clay from clay baths down our drain for 20 years into a septic tank. Never heard of it at all. If you're doing a foot soak, consider the water toxic, because whatever toxins and heavy metals you've got in you will be in there. There's a guy in Hawaii who killed a section of his lawn from the water from soaking his feet. There's a lady in St. George, she killed every plant in her house using the water from soaking her feet because she didn't want to waste it. And she didn't realize that the toxins and heavy metals it pulled from her were in that water. Now, baby powder, the dry powdered clay is the best baby powder you'll ever imagine. Gets rid of diaper rash within the first diaper change. It doesn't have the fragrance, but it's more effective as for diaper rash. Now, if diaper rash gets out of hand, meaning angry red, big open sores, then you use the mud and the diaper will keep it moist. Now, on the piece of paper that you got, that external side, everything that the clay has done on that external side, you know now how to do. Because after tonight, you all are going to have a jar of clay in your kitchen cupboards, right? So if there's a problem, you've got a solution. This is that jar of clay that we mixed up here tonight. I'm not going to hold it over her lap, but I could. So, internal. The guy who wrote the book said that to use the clay internally, you use a teaspoon in a glass of water. There's a wrong way and a right way to do it. We did the wrong way for 30 years. I'm going to show you the wrong way tonight because it's probably the way most of you are doing it if you're using clay. So it's a teaspoon of clay in a glass of water. And what we did for 30 years is we would take the teaspoon of clay and we would put it in the water and then we would stir it and we would whip it and we would fight the lumps. And it's a mess. It sticks to the spoon, it sticks to the glass, it's all lumpy, it's a royal pain. That's the wrong way. So after 30 years, we learned the right way. The right way is you take that same teaspoon of clay and you just sprinkle it or dump it on top of the glass, on the water. You don't get the spoon wet. Just dump it on top of the water and walk away. And a few hours later, you come back and that clay, within about 5 minutes, it'll float on the water for 5 minutes or so, but eventually it'll sink and then it'll sit on the bottom of the glass and it'll hydrate. And as it hydrates there for the next few hours, if you come back 5 or 6 hours later, you can stir that clay and it'll stir as smooth as a glass of milk. With no lumps, just smooth as can be. Now, at that point, you could drink it if you don't mind drinking muddy water. But if you don't like drinking muddy water, after you've stirred it, then put it back in the cupboard and let it sit for another 4 or 5 hours. You come back 4 or 5 hours later and the majority of the water, half the water or more, will be clear. And the sediment will be on the bottom. The minerals will have dissolved into the water. The electronic charge is imparted to the water. So after the sediment's on the bottom, you can drink the clear water off the top and throw the sediment away and get the same benefit as drinking the whole muddy mess. Now, what I do at my house is I've got a glass bottle and I'll have it about that full of water. I'll dump the clay on there in the morning. I'll sit it in the cupboard. When I come home from work at night, the clay will be on the bottom and I'll just shake it up. At that point, I could drink it if I wanted to, but if I'm not ready to drink it, I'll just sit it back in the cupboard and the next morning, just like it was here tonight, 80% of the water's clear. And so in the morning, if I'm ready to drink clay, I'll drink it, either the clear water or I'll shake it up and drink the whole thing. The benefits are the same either way. It's personal choice. Then after I drank that water, then I'll fill the bottle back up about 3/4 full, dump the teaspoon of powder on the water, put on the lid and sit it in the cupboard and walk away. And the next night, I go through that same routine. So that's just a fast or simple way. It's nice having it done that way because then if someone comes to your house who needs clay, like a lady did at our house today, we had it there in the bottle and it was ready for her. Some people like having a volume of clay mixed up in advance, and if they're drinking a lot of it, they might want to have more than a bottle. So here we have a gallon of water and we put in a 1/4 cup. And again, I sprinkled that 1/4 cup on the clay before the class, so it's had some time to hydrate, maybe not fully, but quite a bit. And you can see there's no clay stuck to the spatula, It's not a spatula. Whisk. I'm not a chef. So, but we could drink that right now. In fact, we're going to, because on the invitation to this class, there was supposed to be a message on there that said requirement attendance at this class requires you to drink clay before you leave. Was that on there, Tricia?
I didn't see that. I'm sure everyone's saying here.
But if you would, take this to the back. But let's talk about why would you want to drink mud? Why would you want to do it? The first time that we used clay internally, it was a lady who was pregnant, and due to the iron and the prenatal vitamins, this poor thing was having one bowel movement every week or 10 days. In 3 days of drinking the clear water off the top, her bowels were normal, daily, normal, natural bowel movements. The next situation, there was a gal in Aurora near us, and she described her situation saying that her diarrhea was so bad it would be down both legs and in her shoes before she could get out of the church or the post office or the store, even to the sidewalk. She would have left a trail on the carpet of the building. So she had become homebound. We heard of her through my wife's grandmother. 1 week to the day. In 1 week, that lady came and thanked me for this clay. I said, Eva, don't thank me. I didn't create this. This is God's gift to the world. I said, we were just blessed to learn about it. She said, you don't know how good it is to go out in public again without fear of embarrassment. So diarrhea, constipation, we've used it for both. Hiatal hernias, acid reflux, H. pylori, everything that's on this list, we have used the clay for. Now, it doesn't matter how much water. Usually we'll use 8 to 12 ounces. It doesn't matter the kind of water. Use the best water you've got. So the best water, 8 to 10 ounces, 8 to 12 ounces. And doing that, you can do it. Some people do it with meals. Some people do it on an empty stomach. Some people do it in the morning. Some people do it at night. Just find out what works for you. Some people do it once a day, some twice a day, some 3 times a day, 4 times a day. At some point, it's going to make you constipated. Because that's the side effect of too much clay, is constipation if you're not drinking enough water. Now generally, if you're drinking enough water, you can take 3 or 4 or 5 teaspoons a day without any trouble. But my feeling is if 3 or 4 teaspoons a day, if that doesn't solve your problem, clay, natural clay is probably not going to solve it. You need to look for something else. Now, how old of a child can you give this to? We had a grandson when he was 2 months old. His mother was no longer able to nurse him. He was put on a formula. The side effect was constipation. We learned that our 2-month-old grandson was having suppositories shoved up his little rectum. When we heard that, we said, hey, you can't do that on our grandkids. We told him to mix the clay like as if they were going to drink it, his parents. Let it settle out. Use the clear water to mix his formula. As soon as Connor got formula made with the water, his little bowels kicked in and he was filling diapers every day. One mother told me that what she did for colic is she would take her daughter's binky, wet it, dip it in the powdered clay. A light film of clay would stick to that wet binky and she would stick it in her daughter's mouth. Her daughter would gum that clay off from the binky and fall asleep and sleep longer than she'd slept for days, wake up with no signs of colic, hungry as a horse, would be a normal child for some period of time, but eventually if or when the colic came back, she said, I didn't hesitate. My mouth, powdered clay, baby's mouth. And resolved colic issues for that mother. Now, there is some information. Medicine. The clay has a negative electronic charge, free radicals, heavy metals, toxins, and poisons. Well, some drugs are seen by the clay as toxic poisons. So, I suggest, don't use clay water to wash down your pills. If you're on a medication, take it a few hours apart. Don't take it right at the same time. Doing that, taking the clay a few hours apart from medication, we have never seen a problem except with Coumadin, which the clay recognizes as a toxic poison. That's why they put it in rat poison. I suggest, if you're on Coumadin, don't take clay, or at least don't take it every day. Now, I have a brother-in-law who's on warfarin. He takes clay a couple of times a week as needed for his heartburn, and a couple of times a week is all he needs for his heartburn, and it doesn't affect his warfarin level. But just be aware that you don't take it with medicine, take it as far apart as possible, and be cautious. Sometimes people will ask me if the clay will help this item or that item or something that I've never even heard about. When people ask me that, I tell them, well, if I had that issue, I would do 3 things. I would drink the clay, because we have found that many external issues are really internal issues that are coming out. And so if in doubt, drink the clay. Number 2, I would put it on topically. If there's a rash, if there's a pain, if there's a swelling, if there's any kind of indication as to where to put it, put it. Use it topically on the rash or the pain, anywhere. And the third thing I would do if I had some issue is I would take a bath, or at least soak my feet. Again, many times we have seen soaking the feet or a full body bath of clay detoxifies the body through the skin, and problems can go away. So 3 things. If in doubt, 3 things. Drink it, topically, and bathe in it. Now sometimes only one or the other is all you need. But if in doubt, try all 3 things. What if you only drink the clear water? What do you do with the sediment? Can you pour that down your drain? Yes. Can you add more water, another glass of water, and stir it up again? No, because the minerals that were in that first glass, the electronic charge that was there with the first glass of water, won't be there in as full potency as the second glass. So we discourage just adding more water and mixing it back up. Some people will put it on their flowers because there might be some value in the minerals in the bottom. Some people will use it in their flowers, put it in their compost, but you can pour it down your drain. Just don't re-add water. And you can put it on plants. This that's in the bottom of this is safe to put on plants because it hasn't absorbed any toxins. After you've done a foot soak and your feet have been in here for 40 minutes, you don't want to use that. There are a lot of different kinds of clays. There are agricultural clays, there are industrial clays. I'm not selling any specific clay, I'm not representing any company, but just find a clay that works for you. Find a clay, if it works, stick with it. If it doesn't work, look for another clay. So we have a few minutes for questions and answers. The question was, after you've mixed the clay in a gel for burns, should you put it in the fridge? No, you could, but room temperature clay already feels cool. Refrigerated clay feels cold. And if you're putting that on a large area of the body, you can throw that person into shock or hypothermia. You don't need to put it in the fridge. And again, we've never had clay go bad, whether it's in the kitchen cupboard or under the seat of my truck. So the question was, on a wound that doesn't heal, is it best to cover it with fabric and let it dry out, or to use plastic? On a wound that won't heal, I would use fabric to let it draw. And again, you don't let it dry totally. You don't let it dry till it's like cement, but definitely let it draw for 8 to 10 hours so that it draws. And I know of wounds that people have fought wounds for 5 years that haven't healed, and within 30 days, they're healed. And your question was shingles. My experience with shingles is the same length of time that a person has had shingles before they try clay. That's how long they'll have the shingles till they're gone. In other words, if someone's had shingles for 3 days and starts using clay, they'll be gone in 3 days. If they've had them 5 days, they'll be gone in 5 days. If they've had them 10 days, they'll be gone in 10 days. I have seen that time and time and time again. Now, if after they've had them for 30 days or longer, then I haven't seen that much success. Partly because to pack yourself in clay for 30 days, every day for 30 days, that's such a nuisance and a pain that most people won't do it that long. But if you can get shingles early, they're gone, like I say, within the number of days that you've had them. And again, if I had shingles, I would do 3 things. Drink it, topically, and bathe in it. So the question was for other skin issues, blemishes, moles and things. Yes, I would say the same thing, those same three things, drink, topical, and bathe in it. However, on scars, old scars, I have no success story on old scars. Now, if there's still healing to be done, yes, then we've seen scars that aren't healed, packed in clay, yes, it heals wonderfully. But old scars, we don't see them going away, and, well, it hasn't helped my freckles. I tell people it doesn't help 2 things, baldness, gray hair, and ugliness. Question was, can you combine the clay with Epsom salt? For what purpose? For a bath. So can you combine the clay with Epsom salt for a bath? Yes, you can. Does the clay need the Epsom salt to make it more effective? No. And in my experience, more effective than Epsom salt is a natural mineral salt that is produced by a company called Redmond. They have a natural mineral salt that for baths is, in my opinion, more effective. Yes, I don't think the Epsom salts would hurt the clay. The question was, how often can you bathe in the clay? You can bathe in the clay every day. Every day. You could do it twice a day. Now, if somebody's really sick, really toxic, then you may not want to do it every day because it could throw you into Herxheimer, which is basically a healing crisis or a cleanse. The body is detoxing so fast that it can give you flu-like symptoms. So, but most people, can do it every day without a problem. The question was, what about tooth decay or tooth infection? It is fantastic. I could dozens of stories of people who have made a poultice the size of a tea bag and put inside the mouth like a chaw of tobacco, right next to an abscessed tooth or a toothache. Others will make a poultice, like a burrito like this, and pack it on the outside. So lots of success stories, both packing it inside and outside. So the question for the inside, you make a burrito like this, but only make it the size of a tea bag. Make it small enough to where you can put it inside the mouth next to the abscessed tooth or next to the pain. And now you can pack the clay. You could put this wet clay inside your mouth without the cloth, but doing that, then your saliva dissolves it faster. Your saliva is going to dissolve it either way. But if you've got it wrapped in cheesecloth or like a little muslin bag, then the saliva won't dissolve it quite so fast. Okay, the question was, well, what about swallowing that clay that's been in your mouth next to that abscessed tooth? Okay, if you've got the clay in your mouth next to an infection, I would try not to swallow it. Spit it out as much as possible. But have I swallowed clay that's been in my mouth next to like a canker that won't heal? Yeah, I'll put the clay in there, and rather than always go to the bathroom to spit it out, I end up swallowing some of that. So the question was, the clay absorbs the infection, but it doesn't kill the organism? Yes and no. The clay is not considered antibacterial. But years ago, BYU did a study on the clay that my father was using in Guatemala. When my father was in Guatemala, he was known as the mission doctor because all the new missionaries who were coming from the States down there, until they got climatized to the food and the water and the parasites and the amoebas, they would bring those sick missionaries to my parents who were serving as humanitarian missionaries, and they would give these struggling sick missionaries the clay that my parents took with them, and that was it. It would resolve their intestinal issues. Well, my father learned while he was down there that the leading cause of death in children in Guatemala is dysentery. And so after he was home, he went to BYU and gave them enough money to do a study on the clay he was using as an antidiarrheal. And they learned in this study that the clay that he was using absorbed 99% of the toxins that the bacteria was emitting. Now, the bacteria that was causing the diarrhea, the clay was absorbing 99% of the toxins. Well, without the toxins that the bacteria was emitting, the bacteria couldn't proliferate. And so then the body's natural defenses simply came in and took over. And so yes, it didn't kill the bacteria, it simply prevented them from having an environment where they could thrive, and then the body took over and was healthy. The same thing, you can put clay on an infected wound. My dad put it on his hand when he had a bright red line all the way into the armpit. Packed it in this mud, wrapped it with a towel. He went to bed that night with a bright red line up his arm. He got up the next morning with no red line. Sucked that out. Again, did the clay kill the bacteria? We don't know. It sucked it out, got rid of the infection, and was dumped in the toilet. There's just so many creative ways, creative things you can do with clay. It's just wonderful. Okay, so the question was, does the clay pull out any beneficial vitamins and minerals? No. So you can take the clay with a fruit smoothie, a protein drink. Some people will take the clay and put it in their protein drink or in their fruit smoothie. Some people will, if they've got young children and they don't want to take the bother of mixing the clay in water. Now, if you've got a child and that you want to have clay water, you could pour this clear water off the top, put that in a separate glass, and you could give that water to a child or to a finicky husband, and he would never know that you just fed him clay water. But you could also mix the clay with orange juice or apple juice to mask it. We have seen people use the clay internally for eczema. We have seen people put on the clay topically for eczema. And it got rid of it in both situations. And again, if I had eczema, I would do all three things. Sometimes eczema really is an internal issue coming out. And so drinking it helps. Now, some people take the clay on an as-needed basis. Some people take it every day as a mineral supplement. Some people take it every day as a detoxifier. For the first 20 years, I just took it on an as-needed basis. Once or twice, maybe 3 or 4 times a year. Other people take it every day. About 3 years ago, I began taking it every day because I was trying to donate blood every 2 months. I've always donated blood my whole life, but only a couple or 3 times a year. But I wanted to donate every 2 months, and after doing that 3 times, my body ended up being low in iron. And I remember how many times in classes that I taught, women would come up to me and tell me that the natural clay had helped their iron levels better than any supplement they'd ever gotten from the drugstore. So I began taking clay every day, and 30 days later I donated. I was turned down in July. I took clay every day, and 30 days later I went to donate blood, and my iron level was spot on. I kept taking clay every day, and 2 months later I donated blood with normal iron. 2 months later I donated blood, normal iron. 2 months later, donated blood, normal iron. My iron level never again went below the healthy blood donor level until a year and a half later, when I decided, well, maybe my body could donate blood without taking the clay on a regular basis. So I quit for 3 or 4 months, and my iron level went back down. So now I'm on clay again at least 3 or 4 times a week. Okay, good question. So the question was, if I'm putting it in a bathtub or soaking my feet, how do I add it? If I'm doing a bathtub, I'll get water across the bottom of the tub. As soon as the tub is covered with an inch of water, then I'll take my 3/4 of a cup and I'll sprinkle it across the water, and I'll dump an extra amount right under the faucet. I leave the water still on. I'll sprinkle a little on the water and extra right at the faucet. And doing that, by the time I get in, there might be a few lumps, but not many. With this, I'll just sprinkle it across the water and get in, and then I just mash the lumps with my toes. Thank you for listening. I've enjoyed this. Please, if you have any questions, contact me. Thank you.